Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Sorry, I had a lot of technical issues trying to embed this into Bloody Elbow. Case in point, Facebook Live really sucks to do these type of things. Anyways, though, thank you for joining me. Let's see if I can find my phone. That way I can answer questions. So we're doing this weekly thing now, where in the middle of each week, we talk a little bit about MMA, because you know what? A lot happens, and most of the time you get coverage at the beginning of the week, at the end, but this is the most interesting part of the week. Smack dab in the middle. Right after events, before events are going to happen. So let's talk. We have a basic outline of what we're going to be talking about. Conor McGregor against who knows. We have Dana White's comments on Jon Jones saying that he is the biggest waste of potential. Do you think that's true? We also have GSP versus Bisping. Are you hyped or are you not hyped? So we'll talk about that. As well, we have a Bellator event this weekend. Mousasi against Shlemenko. A lot of fights were announced this week too. We'll get to all of that, but let's go in the comment section of the video first to see what people are talking about. And yeah, sorry, tons of technical glitches. This is my first time trying to embed a Facebook Live video into the Bloody Elbow website, and guess what? It did not work. Did not work out. Trying to embed All right, Curtis, what's up, man? How's it going? So right off the bat, we're going to talk about Conor McGregor and who he's going to fight next. A lot of rumors about who is he going to take on. Will it be Tony Ferguson, the current UFC interim lightweight champion? Will it be Nate Diaz, the trilogy bout? Or will it be Paulie Malignaggi? He's the wild card in all of this, and he's the fight that I don't think anybody wants to see, but is a fight that is crazy enough to happen, which is ridiculous. But case in point, though, we've got three possible matchups. The one that I want to see the most is Tony Ferguson against Conor McGregor. Why? Because I think it makes the most sense from a technical standpoint. Those are the two best lightweights in the division. Maybe you can include Khabib Nurmagomedov in that. And yeah, Tony Ferguson, he is the rightful number one contender with the interim title. But a part of me still wants to see that Nate Diaz trilogy fight. As well, maybe have Khabib Nurmagomedov slip in at the last minute to fight Conor McGregor in case there's an injury. Basically, the lightweight division right now, it's in a big mess. The only thing we know for sure is that Eddie Alvarez and Justin Gaethje will be fighting, and the winner of that will kind of be on the cusp of a title shot. Neither of them have the big name that it takes to get McGregor to basically give them a title shot. So that's figured out, that we have those two fighters off on the sidelines doing their thing. The winner of that, big boost. The loser goes down. And then we have Conor McGregor, Tony Ferguson, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Edson Barboza. These four people. The only matchup that definitely won't happen is Conor McGregor against Edson Barboza. They're at two ends of the spectrum. Tony could end up fighting Edson for an interim title shot. Khabib could fight Edson Barboza if Tony Ferguson gets the shot. Those are the four players that make sense from a deserving standpoint. But then we have a wild card, Nate Diaz, who rankings-wise and matchup-wise, you would only put him against Conor McGregor because he doesn't actually fit in the division, and it doesn't seem like he wants to fight anybody else. But he's the big money fight. They did 1.6 million pay-per-view buys the first time they fought. I mean, the second time they fought. First time was 1.3 million. Those are the two biggest pay-per-views that the UFC has done in the past 4 or 5 years. You'd have to go back to UFC 100 when they did numbers that were above 1.3 million. So you have those matchups for Conor McGregor where it's going to be either Tony Ferguson or Nate Diaz. If he does take the Nate Diaz fight, that leaves 3 people in an awkward situation. Edson Barboza, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Edson Barboza, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Tony Ferguson. Obviously, one of those people is going to have to fight Tony Ferguson for the interim title. You'd have to go with Khabib Nurmagomedov since there's been so many times where that fight's been scheduled, and they're both clearly the number 1 contenders for the belt. Edson just seems like he's a little bit outside of that. He's had some losses. I mean, he's lost to Tony Ferguson, so nobody would want to see that rematch. So you'd have to do either Khabib against Edson Barboza or Tony Ferguson against Khabib. That is if Conor McGregor fights Nate Diaz. But Conor McGregor, it seems like what he's trying to do is bait everybody else into fights just so that Nate Diaz takes less money for their fight. Because he put out that Tony tweet where Tony Ferguson has said, "Oh, say my name, you won't say my name." And then he just puts out a tweet with the name Tony and a cool picture that's apparently a Photoshop from Grand Theft Auto. And that blew up. But people are saying, no, Conor McGregor doesn't want to actually fight Tony Ferguson. He's just trying to make it so that Nate Diaz thinks, hey, if you want to take all of this money for the fight, well, I can find somebody else to fight. I want a bigger purse. I want more money. And the more Nate Diaz gets, the less I get. No, I have other options, Nate. Lower your standards and let's get this fight done. So then, Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, that's what I think is going to happen. That fight. That's probably going to end up working out. Tony Ferguson is then left on the sidelines, which really sucks. But I think he would stay on the sidelines. He doesn't want to fight anybody. He has the interim championship. If you're an interim champion, the only person you are fighting next is the champion. And I don't think Tony Ferguson will take any other fight than Conor McGregor at this point. But you can imagine how pissed off he'll be if Nate Diaz ends up getting that fight. Khabib, Edson, they don't have the same claim for a title shot. Now, both of them could end up getting a title shot if Nate Diaz gets injured at the last second, Tony Ferguson gets injured at the last second, or a week out, 2 weeks out. That could happen. I feel like Edson Barboza would be the type to jump into that fight. Khabib, with all of his injuries and him always playing it safe when it comes to matchups, taking his time, I don't think he would be a last-minute replacement type of guy, but I can definitely see Edson Barboza doing that. So basically how I have it mapped out is Conor McGregor fights, unfortunately, Nate Diaz next. Tony Ferguson sits on the sidelines, and then Khabib Nurmagomedov and Edson Barboza fight. Meanwhile, Justin Gaethje and Eddie Alvarez fight. And then the winner of those 2 fights, you end up with 3 possible matchups for the winner of Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. Basically, lightweight right now is just full of guys who could compete for the title, who could give Conor McGregor a good fight, or whoever's champion a good fight. It's just there's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of nobody being active. A lot of Tony Ferguson against Kevin Lee, an obvious number 1 contender fighting a guy who hasn't broken into that top 5. So this is going to be an interesting year for the lightweight division these next 12 months because we'll get to see some of those matchups. I just want to see Tony Ferguson against Khabib, though. I think those are the 2 most highly skilled guys in the division. I mean, Conor McGregor is up there, but I think just like stylistically, that would be a crazy fight. Khabib versus McGregor, it would be a one-sided pounding either way. It would be, can Khabib take McGregor down? If he can, Khabib wins. If he can't and McGregor just lands on him, knocks out Khabib. That stylistically is not that interesting, your basic striker versus grappler. But Tony Ferguson against Khabib Nurmagomedov is more interesting because Tony Ferguson's so weird. If he gets taken down, he still has a chance to do something weird. So let's see. Curtis says, everyone wants Conor fight because they make huge money. The division is getting log jammed. And that's exactly the problem, is that these guys, other than Tony Ferguson, aren't fighting. they don't want to fight because they know, and this is Nate Diaz, this is Khabib Nurmagomedov, although he's had a bunch of problems. Those two guys haven't really fought because you have that Conor McGregor belt dangling over you. And if you lose, that goes away. Although Nate Diaz, even if he did lose, I feel like he could still slip his way in. But Khabib, his whole thing is being undefeated. It's being this guy who has never really looked bad in the cage. Maybe one fight where it was controversial, but Khabib has looked perfect. The second he doesn't look perfect, Michael Johnson landed one punch on his chin that looked like it rocked Khabib, and that's what everybody talks about when it comes to Khabib striking. So Khabib, his thing, he needs to look perfect. He needs to look unscathed. The more he fights, the more there will be cracks in his game. The more people will show that Khabib isn't this perfect fighter, that he isn't undefeated, that he's not unbeatable. Khabib needs that perfection in order to get a Conor McGregor fight. And Conor McGregor has already said that Khabib is one of the least likely candidates because he gets injured all the time. He's very unpredictable. You can't guarantee that when you're signed up for a Khabib Nurmagomedov fight that he's actually going to make it to the fight. And Conor hates that. That's one reason why he would take the Nate Diaz fight, why he would take the Tony Ferguson fight, because those guys are pretty dependable when it comes to making fights. Khabib versus Barboza, thoughts? That is a very interesting fight because it's an obvious striker versus grappler. I think Khabib would probably wipe the floor with Barboza in that fight just because Khabib is so dominant in striking, and Barboza, he is good off his back. But I feel like Khabib would overwhelm him. The perfect style to beat Khabib Nurmagomedov is Jose Aldo, is somebody who is impossible to take down. Frankie Edgar couldn't take him down. Chad Mendes, when he could take him down, Aldo was only down for a second. And then has amazing striking. Jose Aldo is the best possible matchup. Now, Edson Barboza, he has okay takedown defense, pretty good takedown defense. He gets hit a lot, which isn't good, but that doesn't really matter against Khabib. Off his back, he doesn't really spring up. He has amazing stand-up, but he depends on a lot of kicks and a lot of high kicks. Jose Aldo's kicks are more low kicks. Edson Barboza uses high kicks, which are bad for takedown attempts because Khabib can catch the kick and then take you down. So I would say probably Khabib would win that fight. I think Khabib beats everybody in the lightweight division that doesn't present that type of unique style like Tony Ferguson does, where it's unpredictable and Khabib can either get caught with something or just can't hold Tony Ferguson down because he's so unique on the mat. His jiu-jitsu is so weird and unexpected. And then Conor McGregor is just on the feet, is very unpredictable. I say Tony Ferguson is a better matchup against Khabib Nurmagomedov than Conor McGregor is. With Conor McGregor, it's basically, if Khabib can get him down, it's over. And I said this before, and if Conor can hit him before he gets taken down, then Conor wins there. Khabib versus Ferguson won't happen. They already booked it 4 times, and they keep pulling out. And that's one of the big things that sucks about that fight. Out of any fight, if I could pay money to watch a fight, it would be that fight. I was so excited every time that was scheduled. Because it's literally, when do you get the number 1 and number 2 contender of a division actually fighting? It doesn't happen that often. I'm actually going to fix the lighting here. It's getting dark out, so... But yeah, when do you actually get the number 1 and number 2 contenders in a division fighting each other? Frankie Edgar versus Chad Mendes is when that last happened, I think. I can't think of many more matchups where there's no championship on the line, but you have the 2 absolute best that have looked unbeatable, that have looked so perfect in their last 5, 6, 7, 8 fights. Like Khabib and Ferguson are both on massive winning streaks. If they fought each other, that would be amazing. We would get to see one of those two fighters lose. And we haven't seen them lose in forever. They've been so impressive. So we would get answers to a whole lot of questions. Can Ferguson stuff Khabib Nurmagomedov's takedowns? Can somebody actually challenge Khabib when it comes to wrestling? Because Tony Ferguson's wrestling is pretty impressive. What happens when Khabib is forced to stand on the feet with somebody? Can he understand somebody's style like Tony Ferguson? How good is he when it comes to striking? And then can Khabib go 5 rounds? I'm pretty sure we haven't seen Khabib Nurmagomedov in a 5-round fight. And if that fight were to take place, it better be 5 rounds. So just a super interesting fight. But like you said, most likely will never happen because it just never ends up working out. Do you think Conor's next fight, regardless of who it is, will be at UFC 219? Let's actually go to, which is UFC 219? I think is that Las Vegas? UFC 219. So am I going to actually crank the light up here? Oh, December 30th? No. Conor McGregor will not fight. Sorry, just cranking the light up here, just because I noticed that I'm super dark on the screen. There we go, that's a little better. But yeah, December 30th? No, definitely not. There's no way that Conor McGregor fights in 2017. He needs time to get back into training, and he's very methodical when it comes to picking these fights. He usually likes to take a lot of time, not a whole lot of time between fights, but not 2 or 3 months. That would be ridiculous. And he has a kid now. Things are going to take longer. He's going to want to get back into the MMA groove. It's been, over a year since he last fought? So definitely not UFC 219. I wouldn't want it to be delayed until St. Patrick's Day because that's really pushing the fight far away. There would be a better in between. But if you are going to do the fight and you want it to do the most insane numbers, doing it on St. Patrick's Day would just blow up. Everybody would say, oh, it's St. Patrick's Day. What does that mean? The fights. And it can be on like St. Patrick's Day weekend. Like I don't know how St. Patrick's works if it's on a Saturday or something. But if you do it that weekend, that would be the best promotion. Everybody, they would think, oh, it's St. Patrick's. Oh, the fight. Irishman. Conor McGregor. That would be insane. Bars, every single bar would play. That's all everybody would be talking about. It would not be St. Patrick's Day that day. It would be Conor McGregor Day that day. So doing the trilogy fight with Nate Diaz, I think they could raise the excitement on that portion of it to say, oh, it's St. Patrick's Day. Well, guess what? You get Conor McGregor and the trilogy fight. That would be just promotionally through the roof, maybe 2 million pay-per-view buys, especially with Conor coming off of the Mayweather fight. I think that's the greatest UFC card that the greatest pay-per-view that the UFC could do. That would be the most hype thing in the world. I would have my friends texting me, where are you St. Patrick's Day? We have to go party, and then we have to go watch the fight. That would be crazy. So that's what I'm saying. If I'm a promoter, I want the most pay-per-view buys for an event. That's the fight that I'm doing. That's the date that I'm doing. Nate Diaz on St. Patrick's Day. Let's see. St. Patrick's Day 2018. St. Patrick's 2018. When is that? That is March 17th. So that's a long ways away. And with the UFC, nothing's ever guaranteed. So even if you do schedule it at that time, things don't always work out. I'm down for it, though. We can wait a little bit to have Conor McGregor come back. Maybe let some of the other things in the lightweight division work out. Have the winner of Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. Maybe have Tony Ferguson fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. Maybe have the winner of Eddie Alvarez against Justin Gaethje fight Tony Ferguson, and then have Edson Barboza fight Khabib. But that's what I love. We actually get to talk about how interesting the lightweight division is. There's just so many possibilities. There was a long time where it was just rematch after rematch, but with Conor McGregor taking his time and going away, the division has now made itself super interesting. So hopefully these matchups end up happening. Hopefully 2018 is the best year in lightweight history. Daryl says, I like McGregor and don't disagree with any of his fights so far. It's good business and every fighter would do the same thing given the opportunity. That being said, if he doesn't fight Ferguson next, he can fuck off. Yeah, that would be a big blow to Conor McGregor's, I don't know, what would you call it? Conor McGregor says that he's the best in the world, which is true when it comes to the lightweight division. I think he needs to still prove it, though. I think the lightweight division is the division in the UFC where winning the championship isn't enough to call yourself the best in that division. There are about 4 people who have held the title over the past 4 or 5 years. It's a title where it's a year-by-year thing. Who's the best lightweight of 2014? Who's the best lightweight of 2015? Oh, it was Benson Henderson. It was Anthony Pettis. Oh, it was Rafael dos Anjos. Oh, it was Eddie Alvarez. And now this year, the best lightweight is Conor McGregor. Who's the best lightweight next year? So you are not the best lightweight. You're just the best lightweight of that year. When Conor McGregor defeated Jose Aldo, he defeated a guy who had held the championship since the UFC brought the featherweight division into the UFC. That made people say Conor McGregor is the UFC featherweight champion. Not only did he beat the greatest featherweight champion in history, he beat guys before that. He beat Max Holloway, Chad Mendes, Dustin Poirier when he was up there in the division. So he beat those guys. At lightweight, he defeated the champion. That's great. But that's not enough in the lightweight division. In the lightweight division, you have to work your way up the division, defeat a murderer's row of people, then win the championship, and then defend it 1 or 2 times. Then you are the best at lightweight. But right now, we can't say that Conor McGregor is the best at lightweight. If he fights Tony Ferguson, then we can say, okay, he wants to be the best at lightweight. He is going to make that claim. And if he beats Tony Ferguson, then hell, he's probably the best at lightweight. Beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, you are definitely the best at lightweight. But holding the championship at lightweight, it doesn't mean you're the best at lightweight. It means you were the best lightweight that year. So basically, yeah, if Conor McGregor doesn't fight Tony Ferguson, that's a whole lot of bullshit. But from a promotional standpoint, from I want a big fight with my friends, like to watch with my friends, then yeah, I'm up for the Nate Diaz fight on St. Patrick's Day. And hey, maybe do Tony Ferguson fight on St. Patrick's Day. Justin Gaethje versus Eddie Alvarez is going to be a brawl. Woo! That fight is going to be bonkers. I don't even know who I would pick in that fight. I don't even care who wins that fight. That fight is going to be violence. Yeah, I would pick Eddie Alvarez just because I think he's going to come in with a game plan. I don't think he's going to be as down to just swing. Or just bang it out. I think he's going to be really smart about his approach. I thought the same, though, about the McGregor fight, and he didn't do that. I would have to lean more towards Eddie Alvarez, but he's been in so many wars, but so is Gaethje. But Gaethje just looks unstoppable. He has the momentum. Just a hell of a fight, though. I'm going to try to fix this lighting, though. Here, let's see. I have my light right here. Let's see if I can turn it up. At least turn up the brightness on my screen. But yeah, that fight's absolutely insane. Sorry, just a second. Configure video. Just gonna bump up the brightness because it got dark out. There we go. Ooh, that does not look flattering. There we go. That's a little better. And yeah, Eddie Alvarez versus Justin Gaethje, an absolute banger. And the winner of that fight definitely stakes their claim at a #1 contenders bout against, or an interim title fight against Tony Ferguson, if Ferguson isn't the next to get a shot at the title. Lightweight is super interesting. Nathan says Dana White said he's pushing for Conor versus Tony at UFC 219. Again, I don't think it's happening at UFC 219. Way too close. December 31st. What is that? Let's see. Yeah, December 30th. Looking at my calendar. That's what? 64 days. How many weeks is that? 12 weeks. If it's announced tomorrow, then yes. If it gets announced, or if it's like a week or two from now and the fight is still not announced, then for sure no. But I feel like with Conor McGregor having a baby, with him kind of coming off of the Mayweather fight, both of those two things, I think he wants to take his time. And he can take his time. He isn't in a rush. He doesn't have to do what the UFC says. He can take his time. So let's move on to the next subject. Dana White recently said that Jon Jones was the biggest waste of talent, the biggest waste of potential. What do you think of that? Do you think that Dana White is correct by saying that Jon Jones is the biggest waste of potential? This is a guy who is number three on the list of the most title defenses in UFC history, at least the most consecutive. Who knows? If he didn't get the title stripped from him before, he could have easily been #1. But he's number 3 on the list. When it comes to the top 5 pound-for-pound best fighters ever, Jon Jones is on that list. So how can you say that he's the fighter with the most potential that is like just screwed it up? He kind of fulfilled his potential. He was the greatest light heavyweight in UFC history, or he is the greatest light heavyweight in UFC history. Now, if you're saying, oh, but he got caught using steroids and stuff, and that defeats his legacy, so he can't be pound for pound the best, I don't know, then that means that he would have less potential if he was using performance-enhancing drugs. That situation gets weird, because then you're saying, that is a weird conversation. If you're saying that Jon Jones had the most potential but he screwed it up because he took performance-enhancing drugs, which helped him train and fight. So if he didn't use those performance-enhancing drugs, would he have still had that potential? I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would have been great. But for somebody who used performance-enhancing drugs and then ended up getting caught, I think he did the best he could possibly do. Defended his title 8 or 9 times. I think it was 8 times. George St. Pierre 9 times. Anderson Silva 10 times. Demetrius Johnson 11 times. Jon Jones, he lived up to all potential. He had one of the greatest runs in UFC history. He's one of the greatest champions. Just that he screwed it up in a major way with the car crash, for sure. There is wasted potential there. He could have gone on to do amazing things. But when you're talking about performance enhancers, that's not wasted potential. That's somebody getting caught for cheating, and now you have to look and say, whoa, he was winning those fights while on performance enhancers, allegedly. There's still a lot of legal process that needs to go on, but he did have illegal substances in his system when he fought Cormier. If you're saying that his potential was wasted, a lot of his potential was because he used performance-enhancing drugs. Maybe. Maybe the performance-enhancing drugs didn't do anything. Maybe he only used them for 1 or 2 fights. We don't know that. But to say that he's wasted his potential because he used performance-enhancing drugs and got caught, there's a lot of blurriness there because we don't know if his potential was because of those performance enhancers. So I think Jon Jones, he's going to go down as one of the greatest in history with a big ol' asterisk next to his name. Why? Because he was caught. If you're saying, who are the greatest fighters of all time? Not putting an asterisk, not saying, oh, he did performance-enhancing drugs. You put him number 1 or 2 or 3. I mean, it's Jon Jones, Anderson Silva, Georges St. Pierre, Demetrius Johnson. Those are the 4 guys that you can pretty much order in any way. And that's depending on if you go by overall skill, if you go by the big names that they fought, if you go by drawing power, if you go by dominance. That all depends. But those 4 guys are interchangeable. When you're talking about the greatest of all time and considering everything, including performance-enhancing drugs, if you think that dismisses a lot of what they've done, then you go Georges St. Pierre, Demetrius Johnson, or those 2 guys switching. And then Anderson Silva and Jon Jones get bumped down. Jose Aldo's up there, but the way he was knocked out was so spectacular, and now he's lost another fight. But yeah, I think Jon Jones really did reach his potential given all that he did. And yeah, a part of him getting suspended and losing, that's Jon Jones. We would not have the fighter Jon Jones, the reckless, creative Jon Jones without all of the bad. So his potential, the reason he was so great is because of all of the negative things he did. At least that's what I believe. So yeah, Jon Jones, I don't think he was the biggest waste of potential. I think he ended up getting to the top, holding on to the title for as long as anybody else has done. And yeah, he had a couple more dominant years left. Yes, he could have added a couple more title wins. He could have been the greatest of all time. But he wasn't because he took performance enhancers that helped him get to the top anyways. I don't know. It's a very weird conversation. I can understand, though, Dana White saying that, for sure. It is okay to argue Jones was juicing against Gus because that would have been the difference. Is it okay to argue Jones was juicing against Gus because that would have been the difference? I think what you mean by that is if Jones was juicing against Gustafsson, that maybe performance enhancers don't make that big of a difference, but if they make the tiniest bit of difference, then he would have lost that fight. If he was on performance enhancers for that fight, the tide would have changed enough for Gustafsson to win, and then he would have only had, what, 4, 5, 6? That would have been 5 title defenses in a row, or 6? I think Gustafsson was number 6. And then he wouldn't be the greatest of all time. He would be one of the greatest, but he would only enter at number 6, 5, or 4. So if that's what you're saying by that, I definitely agree that that's the one performance that, if he was on performance-enhancing drugs, that would have been turned. And again, that depends on how like, the significance of his PED use, if they did actually make a difference. Okay, I got it right, Mark. That's good to hear. It's a very complicated subject. Jon Jones is just... I think that you do not get the fighter Jon Jones if you do not get the crazy, unpredictable, reckless Jon Jones. So at the end of the day, his potential was in his craziness. Jones is the best fighter out of UFC facts. Well, when Vitor had him locked up in an armbar, he was able to lift Vitor's whole body. Did the roids help him, though? That's a good question. They might have, but Vitor Belfort was juiced to the gills for that fight. So that fight, it was on even playing field. Chael Sonnen, even playing field, because, I mean, he's been caught with a whole bunch of performance-enhancing drugs. So Jon Jones has fought his fair share of people who have used and been caught for performance enhancers. Same with Anderson Silva. So you look at those fights and you're like, okay, those were even fights. We can count those as wins. The Gustafsson fight, though, look at that fight and you're just like, yeah, performance enhancers could have definitely helped Jon Jones barely get the victory. Gustafsson has never been caught, so you could say that's where Jon Jones's title reign ends. And then he's not one of the greatest of all time, and then there isn't that potential there. Very complicated subject, though. Let's move on to Georges St-Pierre against Michael Bisping. Are you hyped? Is this a fight that you are hyped for? Because I'm kind of not that hyped for it. Maybe I will be closer to the fight, but when we had the press conference in Toronto, which, by the way, I couldn't get media credentials to because the UFC, they don't like me. I don't know why. They don't like bloody... Long story. Anyways, that was kind of a meh. Georges St-Pierre pushing Michael Bisping. That's cute, but it's whatever. And I'm talking about this fight specifically. The rest of the card I'm hyped for. This fight specifically, though, I'm just feeling like, The UFC hasn't done enough to really pull me in, to make me want to care about this fight card. I think they can do a lot more, though. Ariel Helwani, he did a fake promo, and then he did the fake promo on the MMA Hour, where he pretended that he was Dana White, that he was the promoter for the UFC. And when he did that, I got pretty hyped. Then, somebody created a YouTube video using Ariel Helwani's promo, and posted it to YouTube, and it looked like a legitimate UFC promo, and it hyped me. I was just like, wow. I'm excited for this fight, and excited for the whole event. Dana White talking about the fight, talking about the event, he just doesn't seem excited. There's no momentum. There's no like, I just want somebody to shake somebody, be just like, oh my god, Georges St-Pierre is back. Holy crap. That's amazing. Like, that's something that I would go to my brother, just shake him, be just like, Georges St-Pierre's back. Like, that's amazing. But I don't feel that way. I feel like, Georges St-Pierre's back. That's nice. He's fighting Michael Bisping? That doesn't really make sense. Should be interesting, though. It's for a championship, but, I mean, are those two the best two middleweights in the world? You could argue that neither is the best middleweight in the world. I mean, you could easily argue Georges St-Pierre isn't. Bisping, you could argue, isn't, since there's an interim champion. Bisping fought Dan Henderson in his first title defense. And the middleweight title has been a little bit hectic since Anderson Silva lost it, so it's the same as the lightweight title now, where you have to actually defend it against the best of the best, which there's a bunch in the middleweight division. I'm not hyped. I don't feel that emotion. I will fight night. I know that. But it's nice when you have a lead up. That's also exciting. It just gets you that much more pumped for the fight. And the TJ Dillashaw Cody Garbrandt fight. Stylistically, that is an amazing fight. They have their history as well, so I'm a little excited for that. There will be a lot of back and forth. Neither is the best trash talker, but there is a huge amount of potential excitement there for that fight. But the UFC isn't doing anything to get me excited for that fight either. I'm hoping, we have about a month before that event, I think? We have more than a couple of weeks. The UFC really needs to turn the dial up after these next couple of weeks to really say, hey, this pay-per-view is the best pay-per-view of 2017. The Jon Jones Daniel Cormier one I think was better, but because of circumstances afterwards kind of puts a stain on it. So you could argue this will be the best pay-per-view of 2017. Why don't we feel that? Why do I not feel that way? Why am I not hyped? I don't know. And that goes down to the promotion. That goes down to the UFC. They have to get me hyped. Maybe that'll happen closer. Maybe it won't. GSP is boring, bro. No, I find his fights interesting. I do. Anyways, we're actually out of time. We will not be able to make it to the other two things. I went way long on the Conor McGregor thing, and we've had some technical difficulties. But if you watch this, thank you so much for watching. We're going to try to have a better setup next time, better lighting, because that got screwed up real quick. We'll embed it into the article next time. But yeah, this was just kind of a quick run, a test run of a live stream type chat that I want to do every week. So thank you for watching, if you watched the whole way through, if you just joined, and I'll see you next week to talk more.